Welcome to the Yale Center for British Arts program, Curators in Conversation, All Women Exhibitions in the US and UK in the 1950s. I'm Rachel Stratton, a postdoctoral research associate at the YCBA, and I'm pleased to welcome today to our program Daniel Belasco. Our discussion today is going to center around Daniel's new book, Women Artists in Mid-Century America, A History in 10 Exhibitions, which includes the Philadelphia Museum of Art exhibition in 1956 on women printmakers, which presented more than 125 artists, many of them British, including Angelica Kauffmann and Laura Knight, both represented in the YCBA's collections. So before we begin our discussion, I've just got a few housekeeping notes. Please note that this program will be recorded and your camera and sound are muted and they'll remain so throughout the program. We'll be using the Q&A feature located on your navigation bar to gather your questions for Daniel, and they'll be answered at the end of the program. But please do just submit questions anytime. And if you would like closed captioning, a live transcript is available by clicking the icon on your navigation bar. Daniel Belasco is an art historian and executive director of the Al Held Foundation. His archive-based research on women artists appears in international journals, books, and catalogues, and his first monograph, Women Artists in Mid-Century America, History in 10 Exhibitions, was published this year. An award-winning museum curator, Belasco has held positions at the Jewish Museum in New York and the Dorsky Museum of Art, SUNY New Paltz, where he organized the survey exhibitions, Shifting the Gaze, Painting and Feminism and Reinventing Ritual, and monographic studies of Bradley Walker Tomlin, Grace Hartigan, Dick Pollock, and Mary Reed Kelly. Welcome, Daniel, and we're thrilled to host this conversation. And although your book is about exhibitions in America, it's really of interest to the YCBA, partly in our ongoing thinking about how British artists were being shown and consumed in the US, which we'll get on to a bit later, but also more broadly in the way it maps out this development of the category of the woman artist in this period. And that's something that I'm looking at in relation to our forthcoming exhibition about Gwen John in 2027, but also as we gear up to the reopening of the museum in 2025, where we'll be presenting many new acquisitions by women artists and opening with a show of Tracy Emin's work. So these are all really interesting and topical discussions for us to have. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Rachel. It's really great to be here. I'd like to acknowledge also Amherst College, where I happen to be Zooming in from today unexpectedly in the area, and appreciate them hosting me. I'd like to thank Courtney Martin, the former director of the YCBA, for introducing me to the great team at the museum and initiating, I think, what will be really great conversation.
Thank you. Okay, so let's dive in. So I'm interested in your introduction. You are quite forthright and open with your readers about stating that you are a male art historian who's committed to new research on the history of modern women artists. And I'm interested in both how you came to be interested in this particular period of history and in writing about the history of women artists.
Yeah, I could probably talk an hour just about that question. It's really been a long gender as a frame, and looking at the lives of women artists has been an interest of mine that really honestly dates back to high school. And when I was looking to begin graduate school in art history, I really wanted to work with Linda Nochlin at the Institute of Fine Arts so I could really deepen my my study and research of what I initially thought would be the feminist art movement of the 60s and 70s. I studied social movements in college, and I really believed that, the feminist art movement was one of the most influential, social, aesthetic, transformative movements, of the 20th century, and merited sustained researched because it impacted everyone's lives, not just women's lives. So that was my starting place. And then working with Linda and then really reading the responses to her essay, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists, written by women artists of a slightly older generation, kind of helped force me to question really some of the fundamental assumptions that I think that I had around the feminist art movement. And this idea that when Elaine de Kooning and Rosalind Drexler, who were older artists, established themselves in the 40s and 50s, if they didn't fully reject, they definitely strongly questioned the feminist notion that they had this, that they were oppressed, basically. I think they understood that they faced discrimination as women, but they didn't necessarily feel that they were individually oppressed. And so there was this friction between these two generations, opened up a lot of questions in my mind, and some of the complexities around understanding what feminist art was. Was it a movement? Was it a set of biographies of individual artists? Is it a formalist enterprise in terms of new media and new imagery? Is it a critical or rhetorical set of discourses? I felt like I needed more grounding and more understanding of the earlier period. So I went back and just flipped through old pages of art news from the late 30s all the way to the early 60s, just to see what was happening among women artists. And that's where I kind of discovered a lot of these group shows of women artists that had not really been addressed at all.
And that leads me to my next question, which is this, your decision to map this history through the exhibition format. And as a curator, the exhibition format is endlessly fascinating as both a literal and figurative space. And so I'm interested in what it did for you, and in telling this history, being able to look at it through the exhibition. And we have some slides that show some of the exhibitions. So if you want to also just go through the different exhibitions that you talk about, and I'll flip through the slides.
Yeah, no, you mentioned how in the book I, established my own perspective, as a male, art historian. And I realized my dissertation looked at a lot of material, but I realized, like, for this book, that exhibitions were I'd say almost like a safer space for me to operate, because they were public already. There were works of art that were selected by the artists themselves, the women artists themselves, or agents acting on their behalf, such as curators or dealers, to put their works forward within contexts that were defined already as, exhibitions of women artists. So it kind of released me from some of the responsibility of the gendering, in a way, because they were already gendering themselves at that time, for very different reasons. And the category of women artists, as we've mentioned, just really shifted through this 20-year period. And I attempted to select what turned out to be 10 exhibitions. It didn't necessarily have to be, but I created a couple of different criteria for myself, that I wanted to be as broadly geographical as possible, meaning getting out of New York, because that could often be very limiting. I wanted to include as diverse media as possible, just getting away again from the dominance of painting, especially within the abstract expressionist period of the 40s and 50s. I tried as best I could to look for exhibitions that included women artists of color. There were very, very few, which really resulted in understanding that in this time period, women artists were largely, the category was implicitly a white category, and that artists of color, if they were women, were then, if they were showed at all, would show more within their identity groups rather than being brought into the women artists category. This again is in the 40s and 50s. I also, there were two kind of levels of all women artist shows. There were the annual exhibitions by women artist groups that there were many of these. There were one in New York, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Chicago. They had their annual exhibitions. Though it itself could be a whole subject for a book, but I just was more interested in the one-offs, the one time that a gallery happened to have an all-women show, or a museum, or another alternative art space, because those seem to capture why, other things that were happening like in the culture at the time, rather than the regular ongoing annual show. But I did make an exception for the show that is depicted on the cover here of the book, the 1952 annual show of the San Francisco women artists, because as most of you can identify, there's a really fantastic wire sculpture by Ruth Asawa that was photographed in the exhibition. It was the only time that Asawa ever exhibited in this with this group. She submitted some works the following year. They were rejected, and she had then moved on because her career was blossoming. And so, but unfortunately, there were, as I said, very, very few women artists of color who were included. So I guess you want to march through the slides. Okay.
Yeah, you could just give us a sense of why you
so
chose.
the 10 shows, the first one, 31 women at Peggy Guggenheim's gallery. I think it's probably the one show that is most popular. There's a lot of scholarship on it. It really was kind of a show of women surrealists before that category had even really been thought through. And it really introduced women as an avant-garde group during World War II. Another important frame for my whole period, which I don't think I address in the book, but was on my mind, was instead of thinking of the 40s and 50s as like a pre-feminist period vis-a-vis the standpoint of the 70s, I thought of it as a post-feminist period from the standpoint of the teens, 20s, and 30s. And so that actually helped kind of clarify some of the claims that were made for women's art as being liberated in its time. And certainly what Guggenheim did exemplified that. So the next show, this exhibition was a two-artist exhibition. The title changed several times over its iteration. It traveled for 10 years from 1944 to 1954. The original title was Portraits of Leading Americans of Negro Leading Americans of Negro Origin. But it definitely it changed over time. And the two artists who were in it were Laura Wheeler Waring and Betsy Graves Renault. Waring is an African-American painter. Renault is a white painter. They both were realists. They both had a lot of interest in liberatory radical politics in the teens and 20s. They were very independent individual women. They both had their own interests in painting portraits of Black people in the 40s. And this foundation, the Harman Foundation, kind of found there was an educational agenda behind pulling together and commissioning a whole other group of portraits. So this was an important exhibition that really directly dealt with race, in this very early civil rights period coming out of World War II. So there was an important photography exhibition at the Camera Club in New York. People might associate the Camera Club with Stieglitz in the early part of the 20th century. It had gone a little cold after Stieglitz picked up shop, and moved on. And there was a woman named Adeline Boker who worked in the, she ran like their exhibition committee, and they were a membership organization, and she felt that it was time to do a all women exhibition at the Camera Club. And so she invited a great range of photographers, from Margaret Burke White to lesser known photographers working in more technical, scientific, medical photography. They each could submit 4 prints, which they hung, and you can see kind of the density. This isn't a museum kind of setting. This is more, as I said, like a club group setting. But it was an important exhibition, and not the only exhibition, not the first exhibition of women photographers, but the only one in this time period. So I wanted to address photography there. Now we're in 1949. Women's colleges were a really important framework to look at, in terms of centering obviously women's lives, women's educations, women's histories. So I did a lot of research into all the women's college art museums, and just to see what they were up to. And there was a bit of an irony that they were serving, exclusively women students and training them to become art historians and curators, but they very rarely actually exhibited the work of women artists. And when they did, like when Smith had this show in 1949, it was on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the college. This was a small show. There were only 10 artists. Each one was invited to select one of their own works that was shown here. And most of them were in a realist vein, but Pereira is one of the few abstract painters in the show. I mentioned briefly the San Francisco Women Artists exhibition. Asawa was really important, but this also opens up discussions of craft and also intergenerational friendships. She was very close with Imogen Cunningham, the photographer, who was 30 or 40 years her senior, who really made her name quite, much earlier. But they were neighbors. They helped each other out, did favors for each other. Cunningham had been a member of this group for decades. She got Asawa to join, again, at least for a year. And so that was another important angle, was these intergenerational friendships, which kind of, I think, wanted to complicate the 70s feminist picture of sort of the Oedipal conflict between the generations of artists. So the Contemporary Art Association in Houston had an exhibition in 1953, Women in Art. I was particularly interested in the inclusion of craft-based material, and especially a lot of fiber and art and weaving and embroidery, media which are very are being heavily revisited now, but in 1953 were also understood as being important expressions of modernism for women artists, taking what was traditionally women's art and thinking it through in a post-World War II atomic age moment. So this show was kind of like the one in like the Camera Club, where you had an artist-led membership organization that had an exhibition committee, and there was a woman who was on that committee who decided that it was time to have an exhibition of women in that space. And they did it, and they did it with the support of the others on the committee and the whole institution. And these were just really interesting one-off projects. So yes, getting directly into this question of greatness, there was an exhibition at the Delius Gallery in 1955 in New York City, kind of mostly a secondary market gallery. They did some primary market shows. But the guy who ran the show, Mark Frederick Geis, decided to do an exhibition of 20 artists, 10 who he considered famous women artists, and 10 who are more contemporary artists, to really make the point, in that time, 1955, that that he felt that women had achieved greatness in art, recognizing that there were far fewer of them than men, but that was the perspective of the 1950s, that this category of women artists had become sort of expansive enough, and there was enough art history behind it to make those claims. So here the image of Motors and Becker is in fact the only one that I've been able to identify that was in that show. Some of these exhibitions had detailed checklists, others just had lists of artists, and maybe the medium. So I really did a little bit of guesswork in the book. So it's interesting just how these same artists are just continuing to circulate in the present. And obviously there's a fantastic exhibition of Motors and Becker's art at the Neue Gallery. So yeah. Okay, so here's the Printmakers exhibition, another media specific show that was at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. This was notable for a number of reasons. I guess especially it was really the only, I'd say, major encyclopedic museum that had an all-women exhibition in the entire period of my research, so the 40s, 50s, early 60s. The Detroit Institute of Art had devoted one of their annual exhibitions to all women in 1943, and that was basically it. The women artists in San Francisco, they showed their work at the San Francisco Museum of Art too, but it wasn't necessarily curated by the curators of the San Francisco Museum of Art. It didn't really have the same institutional support that this show had at Philadelphia Museum of Art. We had their prints curator, Neelan McNulty, did this exhibition. Carl Zagrosser largely built the collection in a partnership with the Prince Center in Philadelphia. And we'll talk about it more, but I just want to highlight the work on the left by Norma Morgan, a Black American artist who was really one of the few who was included in these all-women art shows of the time. So this is another exhibition that has a little more scholarly attention, and Amy von Lintel has done a lot of really great research and writing into this one. There was a gallery in Amarillo, Texas, run by an artist and an educator named Dord Fitz, and he was a closeted gay man, and he had a very kind of progressive understanding of art, and the social and educational and spiritual value of art. So from Texas, he would go to New York a couple times a year. He met artists. He actually became good friends with Elaine de Kooning and Jane Raynal, and they decided that they would do a corrective exhibition that would make up for all of his years of mostly showing male artists, and they would do an all-women artist show. And he delegated most of the curating to de Kooning and to Raynal. So I think there was about 17 artists that ended up in this exhibition. And it really was kind of the first all-women abstract expressionist exhibition without using that name. So in the same way that Peggy Guggenheim's show of 43 was the first all-women surrealist show, this was the first all-women abstract expressionist show before having that retroactive terminology. And the last one, another women's college nearby, Mount Holyoke. Similar to Smith, it was an anniversary. They decided to do a all-women exhibition in the museum as part of the larger 125th anniversary celebrations. There's some really great kind of press photos of the curators and the board members and one of the artists showing people around with Claire Falkenstein and Joan Mitchell. So this was just an extraordinary selection. You can see the Lee Bontecu kind of up peeking in the back of the upper right photo. So this is a show I think it would stand up now, as a curated exhibition from this time period. But it was interesting to me. I wanted to end my book at 1962 because the following year, 63, is when Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, and it's traditionally thought of as the start of the second wave feminist political movement culturally, and also by 63, you have artists like Carolee Schneemann and Yoko Ono, Anita Steckel, who are making work that we really would call feminist artwork, even if that term wasn't used at the moment. So this was the end of that period, I think, at the peak of when the category of women artists was trying to be celebrated as a standalone category, especially within the Cold War, of, narratives of American democracy, and how American democracy and the American way was, better and more liberal for women than the Soviet Union and their, and their society and the position of women there. So there was a politics kind of lurking behind this exhibition that I wanted to unearth and then use as a stopping point for the book.
And what I think is so great about the selection in general is that, you bookend it with these shows that are kind of essentially avant-garde artists, but actually you get this really amazing kind of sweep of art and craft that, and how these fit in this moment when modernism is really being formulated, but that actually there is a whole lot of other types of art going on at the same time. And so that really comes out in the book as well. And the other thing that really comes through is how many different types of organization were involved in exhibition making in this period. And so that brings me really to our kind of case study exhibition that we're going to look at, which is, as you mentioned, the Women Printmakers exhibition at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And it's well, there's another exhibition from the Smithsonian, but this is really the only kind of, as you say, encyclopedic museum exhibition in your book, and as you mentioned, in the period. And it is very striking that there are quite a lot. So just putting on my YCBA curator hat for a minute, there are a lot of British women artists in this exhibition. It is probably the largest category outside of American artists. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about why that is and how they were being shown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this exhibition has about 125 artists, mostly American, but because it does trace a 400-year history, they do start with European artists, and Angelica Kauffmann certainly can be included as the category of British artist, and she was, one of the most celebrated artists of her time. And in this exhibition, there were about 5 prints by her, and so you could sort of see the importance of the different artists in terms of not just being represented individually, but having multiple prints. I think also the question kind of dovetails a little bit towards curatorial taste, and I wish I, had a full understanding or full access to that. But my sense is that there were some of the, there were prints by the more avant-garde artists who are typically French or German, like Morisot or Kollwitz, in this exhibition. But the kind of the broader American, let's say, taste for art might have, veered more towards British artists. British women artists were using, modernist modes, but were, I don't know, they were somehow collected differently. But this exhibition really came out and really as a partnership, kind of by the way, with the Print Center, which was an important and remains an important site for the creation, exhibition, and collection of contemporary prints in Philadelphia. And they would do annual shows, they'd award prizes, they would collect, and those would end up getting into the Philadelphia Museum's collection. But they also, the woman who ran the Print Center, I have to look for her name. Oh yeah, Bertha von Mostiker. She understood that Stanley William Hayter was a really important instructor, and so she had him come from New York to Philadelphia to have workshops every year from 45 to the early 50s. And he was an important instructor, influence, British artist, and I think that also probably was one of these behind the scenes conversations that probably influenced some of the collecting patterns behind this show.
Yeah, he's a really interesting figure for those listening who don't know him. He was a British surrealist artist, did a lot of his training in Paris, but then moved to the US and set up a very famous etching studio called Atelier 17. And a lot of artists went through that studio. And actually, Norma Morgan, who you mentioned earlier, was one of those artists who went through Stanley William Hayter's studio, and is a kind of interesting to the YCBA community in a number of ways, partly because she was born in New Haven, which is really interesting, and also traveled to the UK. And this is a depiction of a British landscape. So can you tell us a bit more about her story and her kind of relationship with Stanley William Hayter and with the UK?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think she plays, I think, an important role, not just, as an individual artist in her time, but even just my thinking about, the lives and the stories of diverse women artists, in the 1950s. She was an African-American woman born in 1928. She had exposure to art in high school. The artist Elton Fax somehow crossed paths with her. She studied both in New Haven, then she moved with her mother to New York and studied at the Art Students League.
You know where she studied in New Haven?
At the Whitney School. Yeah. So actually, I would like to acknowledge Bruce Weber, who's another art historian who did a really great exhibition of Morgan's work at the Woodstock Artists Association and Museum a couple of years ago. So I'm definitely relying on his research and in telling her story here. But someone at the Art Students League suggested that she work with Hayter at his studio, and she did so. And I think that's where she learned etching and other types of printmaking, engraving, and she apparently had a long-standing interest in British literature, and she won a fellowship, I can't remember the name of it, to just travel in England and to follow in the footsteps of her favorite writers like Thomas Hardy and the Bronte sisters. And this brought her out to the West Country in Cornwall, and she was fascinated, like many artists before her, with these like outcroppings, and they became the subject of probably her first important body of work, such as Granite Tour, which she showed at the Philadelphia Print Center. She won a prize. It was collected by the Philadelphia Museum at that time. The Museum of Modern Art bought a print soon after. So this became a bit of her calling card. And so these, I think these very like raw, stark depictions of the landscape became, kind of perhaps, psychological studies or perhaps landscape studies. It was only later I think in the 60s that she introduced more narrative elements to the work. And she was very inspired by Romanticism and fantasy realms. And I suggest people looking up her work. But she was in this exhibition in Philadelphia because her work was already in the PMA collection. Interestingly, someone like Elizabeth Catlett, who has a much more significant reputation, was not in the collection of the PMA at the time, even though she was very active in the 1940s in printmaking. But just these career paths, they go through different, social, economic, curatorial networks. And Morgan was in the right network with Hayter and with Zagrosser at Philadelphia Museum of Art for her work to be seen, appreciated, collected, and exhibited. I wish I knew more about why, she is not as well known. She did have a number of solo shows in New York throughout the 50s, but I think she pulled away from the scene. it's, one could easily state that it was racism and sexism. I'm sure she encountered a lot of it, but I don't know the specific biographical facts about her choices too.
It's so interesting to think about the the kind of undercurrents that are feeding into museum collecting, and the fact that she was in the orbit of the print club, and Stanley William Hayter, meant that she kind of got this visibility in this show and through the Philadelphia Museum collection in a way that other printmakers in the period who had
and a lot of it is just her imagery too. I think because her imagery was concerned with a European tradition, and she was attracted to English literature, whereas Catlett's imagery at the time, because she was coming from more of a left-wing position, she was doing portraits of Sojourner Truth and really, making clear statements about her identity as, as a Black woman in the late 1940s, which I think the museum world wasn't really fully ready for at that time. I guess it's
yeah. And am I right in saying that there was a critic in the period who aligned these kind of landscapes with a kind of
it was retroactively. So Elton Fax, who was a mentor for her when she was a teenager, a Black printmaker active in Philadelphia, he wrote a book about Black artists and did a chapter on her. And this was in early 70s. So I think it was a time when those discourses were more commonly, common in the public. They couldn't have been as, those interpretations couldn't have easily been attached to her work in the 50s. This notion of, this notion of universality is really quite challenging, and how we see identity within also, appeals for universality in whether it's formal language or shared narratives. And so, so I think that more specific identity reading that Fax gave to work like this was more retroactive.
So there's another way in which the some of the exhibitions in your book really relate to the work we do at the YCBA, in that they were coming out of university museums. And so there are two chapters in your book about exhibitions from university museums. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, they're about 10 years apart, how they differed, what they were doing the same and differently, and what role the university museum played in kind of filling this category of the woman artist.
Also it could be a whole conversation unto itself. There were some other important galleries at women's colleges. Vassar had one, Mills College in Oakland had one. They did solo shows of women artists. They never did group shows. So these were the two group shows. And actually it's interesting. I mean, I should say that there were, in the South, there was a couple of exhibitions at women's colleges at, including the second iteration of the 31 Women, was called The Women. It was that Peggy Guggenheim did in partnership with David Porter Gallery in 1945. They're separate shows with the same title, and Porter's show traveled to two women's colleges. So there were more than just these two in this time period. There weren't a lot, but I chose them because they were the most ambitious. They had catalogs. They were part of larger public relations initiatives around the anniversaries. They had prominent attendees and speakers associated not only with the shows, but the larger celebration that really connected these exhibitions to larger trends in politics and the understanding of gender. So for example, with Smith College, that was in 1949 that they were celebrating this anniversary. One of the show opened around the same time that they offered honorary degrees to 10 or 12 women, including Eleanor Roosevelt, who was still playing a very important role internationally. She had chaired the committee with drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so not any comments specifically about this exhibition at Smith, but in the larger conversations around the celebration, Roosevelt did talk a little bit about, this universal notion of human rights and this new period that, this post-war optimistic period that we were entering in at that time. And she also talked personally about her own story, and she never went to college. She was discouraged from going. She was expected to, I guess, play a much more domestic role. So she, wished she had the opportunity to go to college. And so that became another talking point for me, using this exhibition to really talk a lot about the population shifts of women in the post-war America at colleges. So I think in all of them, though, they kind of have this discourse around like excellence because these were elite colleges and that they were, educating the daughters of the elite, and whether they were being trained to become, excellent wives or housewives, or they were potentially trained to go into the professions or have the choice between either or, which was kind of a subject of real consternation at the time. They were all expected that excellence was going to, whatever they would do, they were going to be excellent at it. And so, so I think that was kind of one of the kind of critical frames for all of the artists in this show. But one of the other, I guess, surprises in my research was that there's quite a long list of important art historians and critics who went to women's colleges. So with Smith, we have Dorothy Miller, we have Lucy Lippard, Martha Jackson, just to name a few. But there are very few women artists who graduated from these schools. Joan Mitchell started at Smith, and then she transferred to the Art Institute of Chicago. Sylvia Plath, entered Smith, interested in studying studio art, and then became a poet. And so I think there's like a gap really between these institutions' support of women artists and kind of their larger interests around women and excellence. And so these few exhibitions were attempts to kind of bridge that gap between the women artists and the larger discourses at these women's schools. So that's, the Smith one, and then the Mount Holyoke one I mentioned a little bit earlier in the comments that, to me, behind the general kind of comments about how, women artists, in 1962 are, the freest, most liberated, most accomplished, women artists, ever in the history of art, which was kind of the standard American position at that time. It did kind of fit into a larger like Kennedy administration, New Frontier optimism as well, contra the Soviet Union. And Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who was the special assistant to Kennedy, gave a lecture at Mount Holyoke in 1962 in conjunction with the anniversary in this exhibition. And unfortunately, there wasn't a transcript of it that I was able to discover. But based on the newspaper notes and comments, it seems like he was really addressing the important role of art, in the United States and the need to have federal support of the arts, not individual grants to artists, but just more supportive institutions. And I guess the importance of even questioning authority and this idea of the ability, of free speech, and that supporting art in America is an American value because it's part of free speech. So I was interested in just seeing how this category of women artists kind of shifted a little bit in this 13-year span in terms of how it was allied with larger discourses in American politics and culture. And the aesthetics also shifted significantly from the 10 women who paint mostly in more figural styles Isabel Bishop and George O'Keeffe to the more radical avant-garde styles that we saw in some of the slides, like Montagu and Falkenstein.
And finally, so since publishing this book and, in our conversations about this talk, you have gone back and had a little bit of a look at some of the all-women exhibitions that were happening in Britain. And you talk a little bit in your introduction about how this is actually a longer history that begins in the 19th century. So I'm interested in how they evolve women exhibitions over the 20th century, and whether you found them to be different in character in your brief look at British as opposed to American exhibitions.
Yeah, no, I think right. The history does really start, as far as we know, in London in 1857. The what was then called the Society of Female Artists, which formed a few years earlier, mounted a exhibition of their members in central London, and it was discussed in the press. I think it was a selling gallery, a selling exhibition. They had annuals thereafter. So this field, there's a 150-year history in this field, and so it's been really important that we kind of trace that and see how it interweaves with the time period that I was looking at. And so I guess two levels again, like the regular annual exhibitions of women artist groups. We have the WIAC, the Women's International Art Club, which was mostly English women artists, but they had like a toehold in Paris. They had regular exhibitions of often their members, but they also included international representation. And a lot of the famous women artists of that time were included, and they had exchanges with other women artist groups in America and elsewhere in Europe. So it's important to look at the activities of that organization, but then also the one-offs I think were really interesting. So this exhibition in the middle, the famous British women artists, that date 1953 is a tell that was the year of the coronation of Elizabeth II. And I think having a queen for the first time since Victoria kind of shifted also the conversation around women artists, and even exposed conversation around that Victoria herself was a bit of an artist and dabbled in printmaking, which was addressed in the Philadelphia show in 1956. So I think the status of women shifted and changed, in the 1950s because of Elizabeth. But I'm only getting into it a little bit, and then just shifting into the 70s. It's interesting to see how both, in London and also New York and elsewhere, these long-standing women artists organizations, which primarily serve their members who, as women artists, reacted to feminism, which put a new interest in like content and actually interpreting, feminist content in artwork, and how you can really just see the imagery shifting quite dramatically from the standard still lifes, landscapes, portrait studies of the earlier decades to more psychological works, or works that are, critical about, women's place in society. So you see that happening both in the British exhibitions and in the American ones.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions because we've only got 10 minutes left, and there are quite a few questions. So one question asked, did you find that many women artists went to Paris to begin their artistic careers? Did a majority of these women come back to the US due to what reasons, i.e. World War II?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think, this book covers like 2 or 3 generations of artists. So I think that the earlier generations of artists did go to Paris, but I guess the one exhibition where I really looked at it quite closely was that Smith exhibition from 1949. And interestingly enough, very few of the artists in that exhibition studied in Paris. Most of them studied in New York at the Art Students League, or they studied at the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Um, but no, I mean, certainly women did go to Paris, but I think a large number of them surprisingly did not. But a number of the Black women in this, the few who did show in these exhibitions, like Laura Wheeler Waring or Lois Jones, who I haven't mentioned, they did spend significantly amount of time in studying in Paris in the 20s.
And is that something to do with the quality of art schools available for women in this period in America?
I don't, by the 20th century, I think the schools were pretty open to women artists. The Art Students League, the School of Art Institute of Chicago, I think, yeah. I don't think that was the issue per se.
I mean, just because that they were good, that there were good enough schools in America that meant they didn't have to go to Paris. Was my
Yeah, no, I think it was more of an option. I think if they were drawn to modernism, if they wanted to work in that kind of atelier environment, then they would go to Paris.
So another question here about comparison between women artists in the USA and the USSR. So I wonder why there's no room for women artists in the USSR in comparison with the USA, which maybe is something to contest as well.
Yeah.
But my interest is shaped by the fact that equality between men and women was more developed during USSR, as women had the same responsibilities as men and were treated, in inverted commas, men-like. However, it did not show as much in the art. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I haven't looked at whether there were all women exhibitions in the Soviet Union in this time period. I think it's a great question. I always think as like a reference point, I think the first woman in space was not an American, she was a Russian. And I think that says a lot about, the values of the different political systems at that time. And so when I was speaking, I was definitely speaking from not just my individual perspective, but my understanding of what the American kind of discourse was about women artists, and kind of favoring the American system in this rivalry. But I think that I think it's a great question. I'd like to look into it more.
And this is another very good question. Did the politics of the 1950s, i.e. the blacklisting of artists, affect female artists to the same extent as their male counterparts? Fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm sure the answer is yes, but I feel like it didn't intersect with the shows that I was looking at, only because I think these were artists who I guess were not blacklisted. Alice Neal, I don't think she was ever blacklisted, but she was definitely, a fellow traveler. She was not in any of these shows. The first show she might have been in was a small gallery show in '62. So I think there are some interesting exceptions, like Agnes Martin wasn't in any of these shows. There's just a short list of well-known American artists, white women artists who were active in the 40s, 50s, early 60s who were not in these shows. So I think there's definitely probably some politics behind it. And yeah, I think that's a great question. So there probably were communist women who either were, if they weren't actively blacklisted, they just were not included in these shows.
Yeah. Someone asked, but they might have missed it, but is the African American artist Louise Maye Jones included?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
she wasn't. She did have. She was in an exhibition in 1948. That from the Phillips collection of Washington, D.C. They supported her work. They bought a painting of hers in like 1943 or 44. And then they put out a collection show. that traveled to Nashville and several other places in 1948. And so, yeah, so Lois Jones was definitely in one of these exhibitions. I illustrate her work in the book. I chose not to focus on that particular exhibition, but yeah, she's a really important figure. Also, not only someone who exhibited in these all women contexts, but also created, was a woman who created an art context for her, for herself and her friends and her peers, in Washington, D.C. Though, as far as I can tell, all of the projects that she did were co-ed, men and women participated. So I think gender wasn't her agenda at that time, in the 40s and 50s. But yeah, great question.
And then there's a question here. Were many women artists relegated to illustrating children's books?
It's interesting, relegated or choose, it's hard to know, the push-pull where people like, what are their options and where are the opportunities. In the printmaking show, for example, the artist Wanda Gag, or Gag, I might be mispronouncing her name. She's best known as the illustrator of a book called Millions of Cats, which is very popular in the US. And she's also a very skilled printmaker and lithographer, was really held up as one of the best in that medium. So some of these artists kind of did it all. Some of them maybe started in one place and then moved into some other form. So another interesting artist, Louise Jefferson, another Black artist who was active in the 30s and 40s, in New York, good friend, roommate of Pauli Murray, an amazing story. She showed a lot of prints in the 30s and 40s, but I think she couldn't quite make it as supporting herself as a fine artist, so she became like a book designer, and she was one of the few Black women who worked as a book designer in New York in the 40s and 50s. So I think all artists have to really go where the opportunities are, and then certainly women and Black women, have fewer opportunities, but you do see a broader expression, I think, in their output than usually than one, pot type of medium.
So that's all of the questions that we have. There's one last question that I wanted to ask, which is, thinking about all of the exhibitions that you looked at in your research, not just the ones that you decided to focus on in the book, are there particular media and types of artists that you think came to the surface through looking at this public forum of the exhibition, and and are there types of artists that perhaps didn't get surface because of the exhibition focus?
Yeah, I think there's always a lot of, even though there were hundreds or really thousands of artists who were included in all these shows, especially the membership exhibitions. As I mentioned, there were a couple of notable absences, like Alice Neal, like Agnes Martin, like Elizabeth Catlett. So I think you really have to kind of trace their biographies and really have a granular understanding of where they were exhibiting their work, who is seeing it, if they were being collected, who is collecting their work. And then you can just see these overlaps. But I think that there did always have to be some institutional support, I think, for these women artists, especially to, in these one-off exhibitions in museums and galleries, in order for their work to be recognized. So I think, so yeah, that's why I think of this book as very much an institutional history, a social history, more so than a history of art per se, in terms of a stylistic evolution. because that really is what I think endows the work, meaning and significance from perspective of a gendered analysis, are these like institutional frameworks that are provided.
I think that's a great place to end. Thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been really fascinating. And yeah, take care.
Great. No, thank you so much for the opportunity. And thanks for the great questions.